Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly well. As quietly as one can when the air is thick with the mingled scent of musty straw, herbal ointments, and something suspiciously like swamp water, into the curious, pungent world of medieval medicine. You're standing at the threshold of a small, dark chamber where a physician plies his trade. And by trade I mean he's about to introduce you to an assortment of frogs, jars of cloudy liquid, and tools that seem better suited for the kitchen than any respectable doctor's office. You glance around, nose wrinkling, as you spot a wooden shelf lined with flasks of urine in various cheerful shades of yellow, amber, and downright alarming brown. A fat green frog, looking every bit as unimpressed as you feel, sits in a shallow dish of water on the table's edge, as if awaiting its medical assignment. The room smells like a mixture of old hayloft, damp cellar, and the unfortunate contents of those flasks. A flickering candle throws shadows against the stone walls, and you can just make out the physician himself, robe slightly stained, hair wild, and eyes gleaming with the promise of a diagnosis. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll smell interesting. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from tonight. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your feet shuffle over the rushes scattered on the floor, some of them damp in ways you'd rather not consider. The physician motions for you to sit on a low stool, its cushion long since flattened and fraying at the edges. He peers at you in the flickering light, then reaches for a small clay jar. The frog croaks softly, perhaps in protest or perhaps in warning. Historians still argue whether these frogs were genuinely regarded as medical instruments, or whether the sight of one hopping about simply comforted the ill in some strange medieval fashion. Either way, the creature is an integral part of the scene. The doctor mumbles to himself as he arranges his tools: a worn mortar and pestle, a long wooden spoon, and a row of flasks stoppered with wax. A frog, a flask, and a fervent hope that you'll leave this chamber healthier than when you entered. He dips his fingers into a bowl of cool water and flicks droplets onto the frog's back, murmuring something in Latin that sounds suspiciously like a recipe. A breeze stirs the air through a narrow window slit, carrying in the scent of nearby stables. It's the kind of clinic where diagnoses are half science, half guesswork, and maybe a little bit of theater for good measure. The walls are decorated or perhaps just stained with odd diagrams of the human body, lines drawn to represent veins or energy flows, although no one can quite agree what all the symbols mean. You try not to think about the faint stains that drip down from the corners of these sketches. Historians still debate whether medieval physicians truly believed their treatments were effective, or whether they simply aimed to impress patients. With elaborate rituals, the physician approaches with a flask containing what you fervently hope is some sort of herbal tincture, though deep down, you know better. The color hints at urine, and indeed, he uncorks it and sniffs deeply, as if he's about to declare the vintage of a fine wine. He nods sagely, mutters about bile and humors, and gestures toward your arm, as though to say, brace yourself. The frog, perhaps sensing its role as imminent, gives a resigned croak and settles lower into its dish. You can feel the weight of the room pressing in, the stale air, the flickering light, the uneasy croak of amphibian assistants. Outside, the muffled sound of hooves on cobblestones reminds you that somewhere beyond this chamber, people are enjoying a market day or perhaps sharing bread and ale at a tavern. Meanwhile, you're about to become acquainted with medieval medicine's greatest hits: frog therapy and uroscopy. The physician selects a second flask and holds it aloft, eyeing it against the candle's glow. This one's contents swirl sluggishly, like honey that's been left too long in the cold. He turns it, watching for bubbles, cloudiness, and who knows what else. You wonder fleetingly whether he's hoping for a sign from the heavens in that sluggish swirl. Some scholars argue that these early diagnostic techniques were the foundation of modern urinalysis, while others insist it was more about creating the illusion of knowledge in an era with few real cures. There's a small chest in the corner of the room. Its lid propped open, just enough for you to spot yet more flasks, alongside bundles of dried herbs, perhaps lavender or sage, anything to mask the persistent odors. The frog's dish is moved closer now, and the physician dips his fingers into the cool water once more, this time brushing them across your forehead. It's oddly soothing, despite everything in this space. Every sound seems magnified. The drip of water from the frog's dish, the soft crackle of the candle's wick, the slow, deliberate steps of the physician as he circles you, muttering about balance, excess heat, and the mysterious workings of the body's humors. The frog gives another low croak, and you wonder whether it, too, is contemplating the absurdity of the situation. And so, you sit, enveloped in this curious blend of ritual and remedy, as the doctor prepares for what comes next, a combination of frog, flask, and fervent faith that these ancient methods might ease your ills, or at least provide a good story should you ever emerge from this dim chamber. The physician, with all the seriousness of a man about to perform a grand miracle, lifts the frog from its shallow dish. Water drips from its legs, plopping onto the rushes at your feet, and the poor creature seems as bewildered as you. His hands, calloused from years of grinding herbs and perhaps from wrestling more than a few reluctant frogs, position the amphibian carefully over your inflamed leg. The frog's belly feels cool against your skin, a clammy contrast to the feverish heat radiating from the angry, swollen flesh. You shiver involuntarily as the frog shifts, its webbed feet splaying out for balance, as if it, too, is trying to understand its role in this medical drama. The doctor begins humming a low, tuneless sound, somewhere between a chant and the sort of noise one makes when trying to remember where they put their keys. Historians still argue whether such humming was intended to calm the patient, the frog, or simply the physician himself. In any case, it adds a curious layer to the ritual unfolding before you. He murmurs about drawing out the poison, as if the frog, with its damp skin and bulging eyes, possesses some magical ability to suck away your suffering. There's no leech in sight tonight. The frog is the star of the show. You can't help but glance at the creature, which blinks slowly, perhaps resigned to its fate as a healer's assistant. The cool of its skin actually brings some relief, or maybe that's just the power of suggestion. Either way, you're grateful. For any reprieve, outside, you can just hear the sounds of the village winding down, the clatter of a cart, a dog barking at shadows, the faint strains of a lute from the tavern. Meanwhile, here in this dim room, it's just you, the frog, and the hopeful hum of your physician. He presses the frog down gently, urging it to stay put, muttering something about humors and balance. He's certain, or at least acts as though he's certain, that the frog will draw out whatever malign force has taken up residence in your limb. The frog, to its credit, remains still. Perhaps it senses that struggling would only prolong the ordeal, or perhaps it's just too tired to care. The doctor steps back, arms folded, observing as if waiting for the frog to work its magic. Scholars still debate whether this was truly believed to be a remedy, or whether it was more about providing the patient and the healer with a sense of having done something, anything, in the face of illness. As the minutes tick by, the frog begins to look less vibrant, its skin dulling slightly, its limbs slackening. The physician nods knowingly. "Ah, see," he whispers. "It absorbs the fever." You're not sure whether to feel comforted or guilty that this small creature is allegedly taking on your malady. Still, you can't help but wonder whether the frog simply got tired of being used as a medical tool. He removes the frog carefully, placing it back in its dish, where it lies motionless for a moment before stirring weakly. The physician wipes your leg with a cloth that might once have been white, muttering that the worst of it has been drawn away. He doesn't look at you so much as through you, as though already planning the next stage of treatment. Perhaps more. Frogs. Perhaps something even less appealing. A small pot of salve is produced thick, greenish, and smelling faintly of garlic and something less identifiable. He smears it over the area where the frog was placed, nodding to himself as though reassured by the familiar motions. The salve is cool, and despite its scent, offers a welcome sensation. You sit there, leg glistening with the mixture of frog residue and herbal paste, while the physician returns to his flasks of urine. The frog's part is done, for now. He mutters about how the balance of the humors must be checked, how the frog is merely one tool in his kit. Remember, this is a time when the boundaries between medicine, magic, and guesswork were as thin as the parchment on which these treatments were recorded. There's a scratching sound from the frog's dish, as if it's trying to climb out, or perhaps just protesting its lot in life. The physician ignores it, focused now on selecting another flask, this one containing a liquid the color of weak ale. He swirls it thoughtfully, watching the bubbles rise and fall, as though they hold the answers to all your ailments. Some historians argue that the frog's use wasn't entirely without merit, after all. The coolness of its skin might soothe inflammation, and the ritual itself might calm a distressed patient. Others insist it was pure theater, a way to give the illusion of control in a world where disease was often a mystery. The frog's soft croak seems to echo these uncertainties, filling the small room with a sound both humble and oddly comforting. Outside, the last of the daylight fades, and the flicker of your physician's candle becomes the dominant light in the room. The air feels thicker now, heavy with the mingled scents of herbs, damp rushes, and the indefinable tang of old urine flasks. You shift slightly on the stool, feeling the stiffness in your back, the lingering coolness on your leg where the frog had lain. The physician glances at you, as if just remembering you're still there, and offers a smile more reassuring, perhaps to himself than to you. He sets the flask down and reaches for a small parchment, covered in diagrams of frogs and human limbs. His finger traces a line down the page, stopping at a crude sketch that looks suspiciously like your leg, frog and all that. And so, with the frog's work done, the physician prepares for what comes next. But for now, you sit in that dim, fragrant room, the faint croak of the frog your only companion as the medieval world outside drifts further into night. The physician's focus now shifts fully to the curious world of your urine, which, judging by the array of flasks on the table, is about to take center stage in this medieval diagnostic performance. He picks up a glass flask shaped like a squat pear, its neck long and thin, perfect for swirling. The liquid inside gleams faintly in the candlelight, a pale yellow, not unlike watered-down mead. You watch as he lifts it to eye level, turning it slowly, as if hoping to catch the glint of a hidden truth in its depths. Your urine, it seems, has become a kind of medieval crystal ball, ready to reveal your inner mysteries. The physician hums. Again, yes, the same tuneless drone he used during the frog episode, as he studies the contents. Historians still argue whether these practitioners genuinely believed they could read the body's secrets in a flask of pee, or whether it was simply the best diagnostic tool they had in a time before stethoscopes and blood tests. Either way, your bladder's contribution is now the star attraction. He swirls the flask, peering at it from different angles, watching how the liquid clings to the glass, observing the bubbles that rise and fall. The bubbles, he explains in a low voice that suggests great import, indicate whether your illness stems from heat or cold, dryness or dampness. A bubble that lingers at the surface might mean inflammation. One that sinks swiftly could point to melancholy. You resist the urge to ask whether it simply means you're thirsty. The physician's eyes narrow as he notes a faint cloudiness near the bottom of the flask. "Ah," he murmurs. The sediment speaks. You try not to grimace. As he gives the flask a little shake, watching the tiny particles swirl like dust in a sunbeam. Some scholars suggest that this ritual had practical roots. Cloudy urine can indeed indicate infection or imbalance, but others point out that medieval uroscopy relied heavily on imagination, with charts offering dozens of possible meanings. For every hue and swirl, he sets the flask down for a moment to consult a small wooden case. From it, he extracts a parchment well worn and smudged with use. It's a uroscopy chart, a masterpiece of medieval medical art. Circles and lines radiate from a central diagram of a flask, each sector labeled with terms that promise insight: choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, melancholic. The physician taps a finger on one section, labeled pale and cloudy, nodding gravely as if the chart confirms what he already knew. Outside, you can hear the soft whistle of the wind slipping through narrow alleys, the occasional clatter of shutters being secured against the night. Inside, the room feels smaller somehow, filled with the quiet intensity of this examination. The physician picks up a second flask, this one darker, the color of weak tea, and holds it next to the first for comparison. He gestures for you to look, as if the difference should be obvious. You nod, of course, having no idea what you're supposed to see. The physician mutters about the balance of humors, the delicate dance of hot and cold, wet and dry. He explains that urine reveals how your inner fires burn, how your body struggles against unseen forces. He dips a slender wooden stick into the flask, lifts it out, and sniffs it with the solemn air of a sommelier sampling a rare vintage. Half expect him to swirl the liquid in his mouth next. Historians still debate how much of this was grounded in observation and how much was showmanship. The scent, the color, the clarity all offered clues, or at least the comforting illusion of clues, to a physician desperate to help and a patient desperate to be helped. In a world without antibiotics, even a sniff of urine felt like a step toward understanding. He sets the flasks aside for a moment, rummaging through a basket for a small clay bowl filled with herbs, lavender, rosemary, perhaps a bit of thyme. He sprinkles a pinch of this into the air, as if to cleanse the space, or simply to mask the pervasive scent of the room. You breathe it in gratefully, the sharp tang of the herbs a welcome change. The frog, forgotten for now, shifts in its dish, emitting a soft croak. It's a reminder that in this room of strange rituals, your treatment is a blend of the natural and the mystical, the practical and the theatrical. The physician strokes his beard thoughtfully, then leans over the parchment chart again, tracing a line from one circle to another, murmuring about connections between urine and the stars, the moon's pull on your humors, the hidden tides of your health. He lifts a final flask, this one clear and bright, holding it up as if offering it to the candle's flame. The light refracts through the liquid, casting odd patterns on the wall like miniature stained glass windows in shades of gold. The physician smiles, satisfied that at last, this sample tells him what he needs to know. Whether that's true or whether he simply feels it's time to move on, you'll never know. And so the ritual of urine examination draws to a close, leaving behind flasks of varying hues lined up like sentinels on the table. The physician turns to you, eyes bright, ready to share his diagnosis. But before he speaks, he pauses, as if savoring the moment, as if hoping the urine might yet reveal just a bit more of its secrets. The physician, still cradling the final flask in his hand as though it contains not just your urine but your entire future, shifts his gaze to a curious tool of his trade, a wooden wheel, lovingly painted in bright hues that have faded with time and frequent handling. This is the so-called golden wheel of uroscopy, though, truth be told, it's not golden at all, more a sun-worn ochre with hints of red and blue ink. He sets the flask into a carved groove at the wheel's center, as if slotting a gemstone into a setting. The wheel, divided into sections like a pie chart of your doom, bears labels in faded Latin. terms for colors, textures, and mysterious qualities of urine that supposedly correlate with the inner workings of your body. The physician hums again that peculiar, tuneless drone as he rotates the wheel, aligning your sample with its corresponding color zone. He leans close, candlelight glinting off the glass, his breath fogging the surface for a brief moment. Historians still argue whether these wheels were truly diagnostic aids, or simply props in a performance designed to impress anxious patients. Your urine, it seems, has landed in the section marked Sepalitis et Nebulosus, a phrase that sounds much grander than its humble meaning, pale and cloudy. The physician nods as though this confirms his suspicions. "Ah, yes," he murmurs, "a cooling of the vital fires. Too much phlegm in the system." You resist the urge to point out that the room's draft alone could cool anyone's fires. He adjusts the wheel, moving your sample into alignment with another sector labeled straminious or straw-colored. This, he explains, is generally a sign of good health, unless accompanied by suspicious bubbles, sediment, or odors. He sniffs once. More at the flask, his expression as grave as a man judging the bouquet of a rare vintage. The physician's face brightens ever so slightly, though whether in relief or because he's finally caught the familiar herbal note of the rosemary he scattered earlier, you can't be sure. Beside the wheel, propped against a stack of dog-eared manuscripts, lies a scrap of parchment, perhaps a page torn from a larger chart, its edges curled and stained. Tiny drawings depict flasks filled with liquids of various hues, one a deep amber, another the color of rust, and a third, alarmingly, resembling clotted cream. Each is labeled with dire prognoses: fever of the black bile, heat of the liver, distemper of the brain. The physician taps the parchment, then your flask, then the wheel, linking the three in a silent triangle of authority. The frog, still lounging in its dish, gives a soft, mournful croak, as if to remind you that at least its diagnostic duties were over quickly. The physician, perhaps emboldened by this amphibian endorsement, turns back to his wheel, adjusting it so your flask now sits beneath the sector for aurum clarum clear gold. Historians still debate whether physicians adjusted the wheel to fit their diagnosis or the other way around, but in this moment, it hardly matters. Your physician straightens, brushing his hands together as though dusting off flour. "A balance must be restored," he announces, voice low and steady. "Heat and moisture must be drawn out." You're not sure whether this refers to more frog therapy, a poultice, or perhaps something even less appealing. He gestures toward a corner of the room where bundles of herbs hang drying, sage, thyme, and what might be rue. There's also a small pot of honey, a mortar crusted with residue, and of course a jug of water that looks suspiciously like it came from the same source as the frog's bath. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters, sending a draft through the room that makes the candle flicker wildly. The physician cups the flame protectively, his eyes reflecting its glow, and for a moment he looks almost like a priest at some sacred rite rather than a healer. He murmurs again about the golden wheel, how its guidance is a blend of art and science, or at least what passed for science in this age. The uroscopy wheel, for all its splendor, can offer only so much. He picks up your flask one final time, peering at it as though hoping for a last-minute revelation, some glint of insight that might spare you another round of frog therapy. But alas, the liquid remains as it is, pale, cloudy, and to his mind, a clear sign of imbalance. Some scholars argue that such color wheels represented the first systematic attempts to correlate observable signs with internal conditions. Others suggest they were more like fortune-telling devices, beautiful, intricate, and about as accurate as tossing bones. The physician finally sets the flask down gently, as though it contains not urine but some fragile treasure. He gives the wheel a final spin, letting it settle wherever it will. The frog, silent now, watches from its dish with what you swear is an expression of pity. You realize the night is far from over. There are more rituals to come, more remedies to endure. And the golden wheel, for all its promises, has delivered its verdict. The balance of your body's humors has gone awry, and it's up to frog, flask, and healer to set things right again. The golden wheel's verdict delivered, your physician shifts his attention back to his amphibian assistant. With a certain reverence, he approaches the frog as though greeting an old and trusted colleague. The frog, wide-eyed and still slightly damp from its earlier duties, seems less enthusiastic about the reunion. The physician murmurs something in Latin, which might be a blessing or perhaps just a list of ingredients for a stew. At this point, it's hard to tell. You watch as he selects a length of soft cloth, frayed at the edges but clean, at least by medieval standards. Gently, he wraps the frog, leaving only its head and legs free, a bit like a strange, green baby. The frog's eyes blink slowly, resigned to whatever comes next. The physician kneels at your feet, and before you can object or even fully process what's happening, he begins to tie the bundled frog securely to your solace, binding it so that its cool belly rests firmly against the arch of each foot. Fever, he explains in a tone that brooks no argument, rises, and so the cure must draw it down. Historians still debate whether this practice had any real therapeutic effect, or if it was merely symbolic, a way of giving illness somewhere else to go, an exit route through the body's extremities. Either way, tonight your feet are the exit, and the frogs are the doormen. The sensation is odd, to say the least. The frog's skin is cool and slightly slimy, the cloth binding it surprisingly snug. The creature shifts slightly, toes splaying against your skin, as if trying to get comfortable in its new role. The physician, satisfied with his work, stands and surveys the scene. You, sitting there with frogs lashed to your feet like some unfortunate participant in a medieval prank. The flasks of urine lined up like a miniature army. The golden wheel, still faintly spinning on the table, and the single candle sputtering against the evening's chill. Outside, the wind whistles more insistently now, as if urging you to flee this chamber of peculiar remedies. But here you stay, feeling the weight of the frogs, the binding snug against your skin, and the physician's gaze as he watches for signs, any signs, that the fever is being drawn down. The physician returns to his flasks, comparing them once again in the flickering light, muttering about excess heat, imbalance, and the need for harmony. He pauses to sprinkle a few more herbs over the rushes on the floor, perhaps to sweeten the air, or perhaps as part of the ritual. The smell of thyme and sage mingles with the room's other less pleasant scents, creating a heady mix that makes you a little dizzy. Scholars still argue about the origins of this particular frog foot cure. Some trace it to ancient beliefs about sympathetic magic, the idea that like draws out like, or that one creature can absorb the ills of another. Others suggest it was a simple matter of practicality, the cool, moist skin of the frog genuinely providing a little relief to fevered flesh. In any case, you sit there, feeling oddly grateful for the frog's quiet, passive company. One of the frogs gives a soft croak, a tiny protest or perhaps an encouragement. The physician takes it as a good sign, nodding to himself and rubbing his hands together briskly. He speaks of balance returning, of the body's fires being soothed by these humble creatures. You're not sure whether to feel hopeful or simply bewildered. The candle flickers lower, casting long shadows that make the room feel even smaller. The physician kneels once more, checking the bindings, adjusting them slightly so the frogs are snugger against your skin. The creatures, to their credit, remain still, their eyes half closed as though dozing. The coolness of their bodies offers a strange comfort, a reminder that even in this odd ritual, there is a kind of gentleness. The physician straightens, stretching his back with a soft groan. He gestures to a corner of the room where a small jug of water and a cup rest on a battered stool. He pours you a measure of water, perhaps as a gesture of hospitality, perhaps as part of the treatment. The water is cool and faintly metallic, but refreshing nonetheless. As you drink, you can't help but notice the physician watching you intently, as if waiting for some immediate sign of improvement. A cooling of your brow, a brightening of your eye, a frog sounding a triumphant croak. But the room remains quiet, save for the soft whistle of the wind and the occasional creak of the old beams overhead. And so you sit, frogs lashed to your feet, the candle burning lower, the night deepening outside. The physician busies himself, tidying his flasks and chart, humming his tuneless tune, glancing at you now and then, as if reassured by the sight of his patient enduring this peculiar cure. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once, then falls silent. The village sleeps while you, in this chamber of frogs and flasks, wait for the balance of your humors to shift, for the fever to subside, for dawn, or at least for the next stage in this strange medieval journey toward health. The candle's flame gutters low, casting a wavering light across the physician's weathered face as he turns his attention from your frog-adorned feet to something arguably even stranger, the art of pea prophecy. Yes, tonight, as the frogs slumber against your arches, you are introduced to a class of medieval practitioners who claim that within the humble contents of a bladder could be read not just illness, but destiny itself. The physician, eager to demonstrate the depth of his expertise, rummages through a chest and produces a slim, battered volume filled with diagrams, flasks, stars, planetary symbols, and odd squiggles that may or may not be Latin. He clears his throat in that theatrical way people do before making grand pronouncements, and with great ceremony lifts one of your flasks to the candlelight. He tilts it this way and that, observing how the bubbles rise, how they cling to the glass, how they break at the surface with a soft pop. You get the sinking feeling that every pop is about to be laden with ominous meaning. Ah, he intones, a sign of shifting fortune. The bubbles linger and see, they cluster at the rim. This speaks of unrest in the humors, yes, but also of turbulence ahead. You glance at the frog tied to your foot. Even it looks skeptical. Historians still argue whether uromancers, those who claim to divine fate from urine, were truly believed by their patients or simply tolerated because, well, what else could one do when sick and desperate in a world without antibiotics? The physician sets that flask down, only to pick up another, this one darker, the color of old ale. He tilts it gently, watching the bubbles cling stubbornly to one side before sliding down in a slow procession. This one, he whispers, this tells of a hidden enemy. Someone who speaks kindly to your face, but seeks your downfall. You resist the urge to ask if he means the frog. Outside, the night deepens. The wind has stilled, leaving an uncanny silence broken only by the occasional creak of the timbers overhead and the soft croak of your amphibian foot-warmers. The physician, eyes glittering in the dim light, continues his pea prophecy, now drawing connections between the clarity of your urine and the phase of the moon. A full moon's light, he says, can make urine appear clearer than it is, tricking the eye much as false friends trick the heart. The room feels smaller, closer somehow, as if the weight of these pronouncements presses inward. The physician consults his battered book again, finger tracing lines between drawings of flasks and the symbols for Mars, Venus, and Saturn. He frowns slightly at a particularly elaborate chart, linking the color of urine to omens of war, marriage, and poor harvests. Yours, he says at last, speaks of trials ahead, but also of resilience. The body struggles, yes, but the spirit remains strong. A comforting thought, if a vague one. Scholars still debate whether such readings were earnest attempts at medical diagnosis or simply ways to provide hope or fear when tangible cures were few. The bubbles, the color, the sediment each became a canvas on which healers painted their interpretations, part science, part art, part outright guesswork. You sit, feet adorned with frogs, as the physician spins these tailies, and for a moment, you almost believe in the power of your own pee to reveal the future. He offers you water again, this time infused with a sprig of rosemary, the cup chipped at the rim but clean. The taste is sharp, refreshing, a small mercy in this night of peculiar remedies. The frogs shift slightly, adjusting to their strange duty, their cool skin a steady presence against your fever-warmed feet. The physician turns back to his flasks, lining them up once more, comparing one to another as if they might, through sheer juxtaposition, reveal secrets he's missed. He sniffs at them, holds them to the light, peers into their depths as though expecting to find not just a diagnosis, but perhaps a map of your life's next chapter. The room smells faintly of herbs, of damp rushes, of the strange alchemy of medieval medicine. Outside, the first faint light of dawn brushes the horizon, though here in this dim chamber, the candle still holds sway. The physician sighs, perhaps, disappointed that no grand revelation has come, perhaps simply weary after a long night of frog wrangling and flask examining. He glances at you, offers a small reassuring nod, and murmurs that you have shown great fortitude, as though enduring these rituals is itself part of the cure. And so, you sit, frogs still bound to your feet, flasks of urine arrayed like trophies of the night's strange labors as the physician prepares for what comes next. Somewhere beyond these walls, the world stirs to life again. But here, in the quiet of the medieval clinic, the pea prophets have spoken, and the next stage of your treatment awaits. The physician, as if eager to move beyond the vague foretellings of your future, wipes his hands on a cloth that was once white, but now bears the marks of many such nights streaked with herb stains, ash smudges, and the occasional smear of something best not pondered. His gaze shifts from the flasks to a low table at the room's edge, upon which sits a small mortar, a pestle, and a collection of pouches tied shut with fraying twine. He selects one, untying it carefully, and out tumbles a mixture that glistens oddly in the candlelight, mashed frog, blended with herbs into a sticky, dark green paste. The smell reaches you almost at once, a mix of damp earth, bitter leaves, and something faintly metallic. It's the sort of scent that lingers in your nostrils and makes you question your life choices. The physician gives the mixture a final stir with the pestle. The sound of stone on stone, a soft grinding rhythm in the quiet room. This, he declares, is a poultice worthy of your affliction. The frog's flesh, mashed and mingled with rue, sage, and a touch of honey, is said to draw out the heat, to balance the humors, to restore what illness has unseated. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of frog meat was believed to have intrinsic healing properties, or whether its symbolism as a creature of both water and land made it a natural choice for such cures. Either way, tonight you are to be anointed in amphibian balm. With practiced fingers, he scoops a generous dollop onto a strip of cloth and approaches, the paste glistening ominously in the flickering light. He spreads it across your chest with surprising gentleness. The mixture cool at first, then oddly warm as your skin begins to react to the strong herbs. The texture is gritty, the smell stronger, now sharp, green, and wild, like a storm-drenched forest floor. You close your eyes and focus on the sound of the mortar being set aside, the soft rustle of the rushes beneath your feet, the faint, rhythmic croak of the frog still bound to your soul. The physician hums his tuneless melody again, perhaps to calm you, perhaps to steady his own nerves. Outside, the world remains quiet, the village still wrapped in sleep, though the first birds have begun their tentative pre-dawn songs. Inside, the room is heavy with the mingled scents of frog, herbs, and wax, the air thick and close despite the small slit of a window that lets in the faintest trace of morning breeze. The poultice sets slowly, the honey binding it so it clings to your skin. The physician nods with satisfaction, stepping back to observe his work as if you're a canvas upon which he's painted some great masterpiece. He mutters about the balance of hot and cold, the interplay of humors, the power of the frog to draw out the poison that plagues you. Some scholars suggest that these poultices provided genuine relief, if only because the cooling herbs and moist cloth soothed inflamed skin. Others insist it was all theater, designed to comfort the patient more than to cure. You sit quietly, the weight of the paste on your chest, the frog still gently shifting against your feet. The physician busies himself tidying his tools, scraping the last bits of paste from the mortar, wiping the pestle clean with a scrap of cloth. He hums as he works, the tune as directionless as before, though now it seems almost companionable. A soft background to the night's strange rituals. Your eyes drift closed for a moment, lulled by the rhythm of his movements, the warmth of the paste, the steady croak of your frog-footed companions. You breathe in the heady scent of herbs, the sharper tang of honey, the faint, ever-present must of the room itself. The physician pauses in his work, glancing at you, and seems pleased to see you at ease. He murmurs something about rest being the greatest healer, as if the frog poultice, the urine flasks, and the golden wheel were merely preambles to what truly matters: time and quiet. The candle burns low, its flame steady now that the night winds have calmed. The room glows faintly gold, the shadows long and soft. The physician settles onto a stool, content for the moment to watch over you, to let the poultice and the frogs do their work. Outside, the sky begins to pale, the stars fading one by one. The frogs croak in unison, a sound that seems, in this quiet hour, almost like a blessing. And so you sit, wrapped in the odd comfort of medieval medicine. The night's strange remedies settled around you like a patchwork quilt of belief and ritual. The physician closes his eyes for a moment, the flasks lined up before him, the mortar and pestle cleaned and ready for the next cure. The frog poultice clings to your skin, the herbs working their slow magic, or at least offering the hope of such. And beyond these stone walls, the dawn waits, patient and sure, as the world readies itself for another day. The poultice sets firm against your chest, and for a brief moment, all is still until the physician's gaze flicks once more to his table of flasks. His fingers drum lightly on the wood, as if pondering whether there might yet be one more layer of insight hidden within those vessels. With a decisive nod, he reaches for a flask, uncorks it, and lifts it beneath his nose. And so begins yet another curious medieval ritual, the fine art of urine sniffing. Yes, while today's doctors might favor blood tests or scans, in this chamber of flickering candlelight and herb-scented air, your physician seeks the wisdom of his nose. He inhales deeply, eyes half closing in concentration, as if deciphering the bouquet of a particularly complex wine. Historians still argue whether this practice held any real diagnostic merit, or whether it served more to reassure the patient that their healer was thorough, leaving no sense unused in pursuit of a cure. He waves the flask gently beneath your nose, inviting you to share in the experience. The scent is sharp, earthy, with an undertone of something bitter that makes your eyes water slightly. You're not sure what you're supposed to detect. Notes of rosemary? A hint of last night's bread? The physician nods gravely, as if your expression has confirmed his suspicions. Setting that flask aside, he selects another, this one darker, heavier in the hand. He uncorks it with care, sniffs, and frowns slightly. Too much heat, he mutters. The scent speaks of bile, of humors run riot. He glances at the frog still bound to your foot, as though considering whether it might need to be repositioned to draw out these rebellious forces. Outside, the pale light of dawn creeps further across the sky, though here in the chamber the candle still reigns supreme, casting its warm glow across the flasks, the herbs, the weary frogs. The physician lines up your flasks in order of their sense strength, forming what looks like a tiny parade of liquid evidence. He pauses, sniffs his sleeve, perhaps to clear his palate, so to speak, then leans in for another round. Some scholars suggest that sniffing urine could indeed reveal signs of infection, of imbalance, though perhaps not with the accuracy these medieval healers claimed. Others insist it was largely for show, a way to reinforce the healer's role as one who used every tool, every sense, in the service of the sick. In any case, tonight your physician's nose is as vital an instrument as his eye or his hand. He picks up a final flask, this one nearly clear, and takes a cautious sniff. His brow lifts ever so slightly, a hint of relief softening his features. "This," he says softly, "this speaks of the body's struggle to find harmony once more." A hopeful note at last. The frog at your foot shifts slightly, perhaps encouraged by this pronouncement. The physician wipes his hands again, rubs at his temples, and sighs. The flasks, the frog poultice, the bindings at your feet each. A layer in the complex tapestry of medieval healing, woven together with equal parts knowledge, guesswork, and ritual. You sit, the scent of herbs mingling with the sharper tang of the urine flasks, the weight of the poultice pressing gently against your chest, the frog's a quiet presence against your skin. Outside, the village begins to stir. A rooster crows once, twice, its voice muffled by the thick stone walls. The faint clatter of a cart on cobblestones drifts through the narrow window slit. The night's silence gives way to the soft sounds of morning, though here in the chamber, time seems to linger still, caught between the rituals of darkness and the light of day. The physician straightens, gathering his tools, his flasks, his herbs. The night's work is nearly done, but he casts a last thoughtful glance at you, as if wondering whether there is one more scent to catch, one more clue to be found. Frogs croak softly in unison, a gentle punctuation to the night's strange symphony. And so, with the flasks lined up, their scents catalogued and considered, the physician prepares for the next step in your journey toward health. The frogs shift quietly, the poultice cool against your skin, the first rays of sun brushing the edges of the world beyond these walls. And here you sit, wrapped in the odd comfort of a healer's care, waiting to see what strange remedy the dawn will bring. The first rays of dawn now stretch golden fingers through the narrow window slit, illuminating the chamber's dust motes as they dance lazily in the soft light. The physician, clearly invigorated by the fresh day, turns from his lineup of flasks and frog-strewn floor toward yet another curious method in his medieval toolkit, the art of drawing out infection with frogs. Yes, if you thought your frog-foot experience was as strange as it would get, brace yourself. The amphibian is about to take on boils. He gestures for you to bare your arm where an angry red swelling has begun to rise, hot to the touch and throbbing in that deeply unpleasant way only a boil can. The physician hums always that tuneless hum as he selects a frog, this one larger, its speckled skin slick with moisture, its eyes wide with what you can't help but interpret as dread. He cradles it in both hands as one might a precious relic, then with surprising tenderness, presses its cool belly to the swelling. The sensation is immediate, a strange, soothing chill spreading from the frog's skin, contrasting sharply with the boil's heat. The frog shifts slightly, its feet scrabbling for purchase, but the physician's firm, yet gentle hold keeps it in place. He mutters phrases about humors and poison, about heat seeking an escape, about the frog as the conduit through which your body's imbalance will pass. Historians still argue whether this practice had any genuine effect beyond the temporary relief of the boil's heat being wicked away by the frog's cool skin. Some suggest the symbolism was as important as any physical benefit, the idea that sickness could be drawn out and transferred to another living creature. The frog stays there, pressed gently against your arm, its breath slow and steady, as if it too understands the gravity of its duty. The physician watches intently, eyes darting between the frog and your boil, waiting for some sign, a softening of the swelling perhaps, or the frog's skin darkening in response. The minutes stretch, filled only with the soft creak of the stool beneath you, the faint breeze stirring the herbs that hang drying from the rafters, the occasional croak of the frog still tied to your foot. And then, with great care, the physician, removes the frog, inspecting it as though it might bear visible evidence of your malady. The creature looks much as it did before, though perhaps a little wearier, its limbs slack, its gaze unfocused. The physician nods solemnly. "It has taken the poison," he announces, as if no further proof is required. He places the frog back in its dish, where it rests quietly, as if grateful for the reprieve. He cleans your arm with a cloth soaked in what smells faintly of vinegar and herbs, the liquid cool against your skin. The boil still throbs, though perhaps less fiercely now. Or perhaps it's simply that the frog's chill has left a lingering sense of relief. Some scholars suggest that the real value of such treatments lay not in their physical effects, but in the comfort they offered, the sense that the patient was not alone, that healer and creature alike worked together to ease suffering. The physician turns to his flasks once more, as though tempted to revisit the night's earlier rituals. But then he pauses, as if realizing that for now, the frogs have done their part. He busies himself instead with tidying the chamber, collecting the spent herbs, straightening the parchment charts, adjusting the position of the flasks as though order in his workspace might translate to order in the body. Outside, the village is well awake now. The clatter of hooves on stone, the chatter of voices, the clink of buckets at the well. Inside, the air feels fresher somehow, the night's heavy scents replaced by the crisp promise of morning. The frogs rest in their dishes, the poultice clings cool and comforting to your chest, and the physician, though weary, seems quietly satisfied with the night's labors. He glances at you, offers a small, tired smile, and murmurs about the wisdom of rest, of allowing the body time to respond to these curious treatments. The frog that tended your boil lies motionless now, whether from exhaustion or simple frogly indifference, you can't say. The physician covers it gently with a cloth, a small gesture of respect for its service. And so, with the dawn fully risen and the strange, soft rituals of the night complete, you sit in the quiet of the chamber, the frogs your silent companions. The physician your tireless guide through this labyrinth of medieval healing. The boil may linger, the fever may yet burn, but for now at least the frogs have done their duty, and you, patient as ever, wait to see what curious cure the new day will bring. The morning sun spills its pale light into the chamber, casting long slants across the rough-hewn table where your physician arranges his next tool for your continued enlightenment, a parchment of P-diagrams unrolled with great ceremony as though it were a royal decree. You're offered a seat closer, the better to study this curious chart while breaking your fast on a piece of coarse bread someone has thoughtfully left nearby. Nothing says good morning quite like contemplating. Urine hues over breakfast. The parchment is filled with circles, each representing a flask of urine rendered in careful detail. Shades range from clear as mountain spring water to a deep, troubling brown that looks more like something drained from a ditch after a storm. The drawings are rimmed with tiny, cramped notes in Latin and the occasional symbol denoting the influence of certain planets or humors. The physician taps one image showing a pale, cloudy specimen. Stramenius nebulosus, he declares solemnly, much like your sample. A sign of excessive phlegm, of internal cold. You nod, though your stomach gives a small protest as he moves on to a particularly vivid sketch of reddish urine, labeled rubricus fumosus. Heat of the blood, he explains, or perhaps injury within. He peers at you, as though considering whether you might be bleeding somewhere unseen. You hastily take a bite of bread to avoid answering. Historians still argue whether these P-charts were genuinely diagnostic tools or simply served to impress patients with their intricacy and the apparent erudition of their makers. The physician turns the parchment so you can admire a section depicting urine with sediment. Little flecks are painted with painstaking care, each shape corresponding to a specific imagined ailment. See here? Grit at the bottom speaks of stone, he explains, tracing a line with his finger. Or perhaps trouble of the kidneys. And these bubbles? He gestures to another flask. They tell of wind trapped within the belly. You glance at the bread and reconsider another bite. The parchment smells faintly of age, of ink and smoke, of countless hours spent unrolling and rolling again. The physician's fingers linger on one particularly elaborate diagram, a flask surrounded by stars and a crescent moon. He explains that urine must be examined in proper light, for the moon's phase and the rising of certain constellations could change its appearance and meaning. Some scholars suggest this reflects an early understanding of how light affects color perception. Others insist it's pure astrology, woven into medicine as was common in the age. You can't help but notice how the parchment's edges are worn soft, the ink smudged where generations of fingers have pointed out the same diagrams. The physician's voice softens as he speaks of how these charts were copied and recopied, passed from master to apprentice, treasured as guides in the murky world of diagnosis that the frog at your foot stirs, giving a soft questioning croak, as if wondering why the parchment gets so much attention when it did all the hard work. The physician smiles at the sound, as if reassured by the frog's continued presence. Outside, the sounds of the village grow louder, voices calling, wheels creaking, the clang of metal at the smithy. But here in the quiet of the chamber, the world has narrowed to this curious document, this fragile paper map of the body's secrets. He points to a final section of the chart where flasks are shown in rows, their colors progressing from healthy gold to sickly green to near black. In these we read the course of an illness, he says. The body speaks through the urine as surely as a man speaks through words. The parchment, with all its faded colors and cramped script, seems almost alive in the candle's glow, a relic of centuries of hope and guesswork. Somewhere in the rafters, a bird has nested, and the soft rustle of wings reminds you that morning is well underway. The physician gently rolls up the parchment, tying it with care, as though afraid that even now, centuries-old ink might flake away. He places it back in its chest, as if returning a holy text to its altar. The frog croaks again, softly, as if to say its part isn't quite over yet. And indeed, the physician looks at you, then at the frog, then at the flasks, as if considering the next step in this curious dance of medieval healing. And so, with the chart studied, the bread half-eaten, the sun creeping higher, you remain seated in this chamber of ancient diagrams and living cures, waiting to see where the morning's strange rituals will lead next. The physician, having secured his precious parchment of diagrams, now turns to a small wooden box resting beneath the table. He lifts the lid with care, revealing a collection of tiny cloth pouches, each tied with a bit of twine and labeled in faded ink. He selects one and holds it aloft as if presenting a treasure. Inside, nestled within, is a small, desiccated frog. Its limbs are drawn tight, its skin shrunken and darkened with age, its hollow eye sockets staring eternally into the void. This, the physician declares with quiet reverence, is a protector. He explains that for those afflicted by recurring fevers, by bad humors, or by unseen malevolent forces, it is wise to wear such an amulet. The dried frog, placed in a pouch of linen or soft leather, and hung around the neck or tied at the waist, serves as a guardian, warding off the influences that medicine alone may not banish. Historians still argue whether frog amulets were regarded as genuine medical aids, or whether they occupied a space somewhere between folk magic and formal healing. The physician opens another pouch to show you its contents, a smaller frog, this one wrapped in a scrap of silk, along with a sprig of dried rue and a few grains of coarse salt. He tells you that salt keeps the bad spirits at bay, the rue strengthens the charm, and the frog, well, the frog draws off evil as surely as it draws out fever from flesh. He offers the pouch to you, gesturing that you should tie it to your belt or wear it close to your skin. You take it with some hesitation. The pouch is light, but you can feel the hard shape of the frog within, its brittle limbs fragile as dry twigs. The physician helps you secure it beneath your tunic, the cord, snug against your waist. The frog's strange weight is oddly comforting, a reminder of the curious blend of natural and supernatural that defines this world of medieval healing. Outside, the morning has blossomed fully. The voices of villagers drift through the window, mingling with the clatter of market stalls being set up, the bleat of goats being driven to pasture. Inside, the chamber is a cocoon of quiet purpose. The frog at your foot shifts again, the binding still firm but not uncomfortable. The poultice on your chest is cooled, its herbal scent mellowing with time. The physician busies himself with preparing yet another amulet. This one intended, he says, for children prone to night terrors or fits. A smaller frog still, wrapped in a twist of linen with a drop of wax to seal it, then tied with a thread of red wool. The color wards off the evil eye, he explains. The frog guards the spirit. Together, they protect the child. He places it gently in his chest, alongside other charms and cures, ready for the next worried parent who seeks his aid. Scholars still debate the extent to which such amulets were part of formal medical practice, or whether they represented a merging of healing and household superstition. But in this chamber, there is no clear line between the two, only the earnest desire to help, by any means available. The frog, the herbs, the charms, all tools of the trade, all bearers of hope. Physician sits back, wiping his hands on his ever-present cloth, and surveys his work with quiet satisfaction. You, adorned now with your frog amulet, feel the odd weight of it beneath your tunic, a small but constant reminder of the night's rituals. The frogs in their dishes rest quietly, their duties complete for now. The physician pours a cup of water, offers it to you with a small nod, and speaks of the importance of patience, of allowing the remedies time to work. And so, as the sun climbs higher and the sounds of the waking village fill the air, you sit in the chamber of frogs and flasks, of charms and ancient cures, waiting to see what the next chapter of this strange journey will bring. The morning sun climbs higher, casting stronger beams into the chamber, and your physician, seemingly unwilling to let even the lightest breeze of suspicion enter his domain, begins to speak of a darker side to his curious art, the tricks, the charlatans, the shadowy figures who twist the rituals of urine diagnosis into something altogether less noble. He leans in, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret, and tells you of the frauds who peddle false flasks and forged prognoses to the unsuspecting and the desperate. He describes traveling Euromancers who arrive in bustling towns with satchels of flasks already filled, not with the genuine samples of hopeful patients, but with carefully prepared concoctions of animal urine, spiced wine, and even colored water, designed to mimic the hues of various ailments. Historians still argue whether such deceit was rampant, or whether these stories were exaggerated by more honest practitioners seeking to defend their reputations. The physician opens a drawer and shows you a small flask sealed with wax. This, he says, is a warning. The liquid inside is a vivid green, unnatural and bright, prepared by a fraudster long ago to impress or terrify clients. He tilts it so you can see the way the color catches the light, far removed from the subtle shades of true diagnosis. They would sell charms too, he continues. Fragments of parchment inscribed with nonsense, scraps of cloth said to be blessed, even flasks of what they claimed was sacred water, but was nothing more than stream runoff. He tells of one such charlatan who was caught substituting a nobleman's urine sample with his own dog's, hoping to make the nobleman believe he was cured of a deadly fever. The dog, he claims, became a local legend in its own right, credited with miraculous healing powers before the fraud was discovered. Some scholars suggest such tales were moral lessons, warnings to stay vigilant against trickery, while others believe they reflect the genuine fears of communities grappling with the limits of medical knowledge. The physician sighs and begins inspecting his own flasks again, as if to reassure himself of their honesty. He holds them to the light, swirls them gently, sniffs with practiced precision. His flasks are genuine, of that he is sure. The frog at your foot gives a soft croak, as if offering its own small oath of integrity. Outside, the marketplace hums with life, merchants calling their wares, children chasing each other between carts, the sharp clink of coins exchanging hands. But here in the quiet of the chamber, the physician speaks of the responsibility that comes with his craft, the duty to serve, not to deceive, to heal, not to exploit. He recounts the tale of a healer who once sold a potion made of warm ale, honey, and his own urine, promising it would cure a persistent cough. The man recovered, the physician says with a wry smile, but perhaps it was the honey that did the work. You can't help but chuckle quietly at the thought. The physician busies himself tidying his space, ensuring each flask is properly stoppered, each charm carefully stored, each frog dish freshened with a bit of clean water. The frogs blink slowly. In the growing daylight, their duties for now at an end. He takes one final look at the false flask in his hand, then sets it aside, as if placing temptation out of reach. Somewhere beyond the window, a bell tolls the hour, and the day's business begins in earnest. But in this small room of flasks and frogs, of truth and trickery, the physician pauses, reflecting on the fine line between healer and fraud, between faith and folly. The frogs rest, the poultice cools against your chest, and the weight of your frog amulet sits snug against your skin. You sit quietly, waiting to see what peculiar cure or curious tale the day will bring next. The physician, having set aside the fraudulent flask as though its very presence might sully the air, now turns his attention to an altogether more earnest endeavor, the brewing of a potion, a concoction in which frog slime plays a starring role. He moves with care, selecting each ingredient from the cluttered shelves and battered chests that line the chamber. The mortar and pestle are returned to their place of honor, as are a small iron pot and a ladle carved from dark wood, worn smooth. By years of use. Into the mortar go the first ingredients: a pinch of dried sage, a sprig of thyme, a crumble of dried rose petals. The room fills with their sharp, comforting scents, familiar and strangely reassuring after the night's stranger. Odors. The physician hums as he works, that same wandering tune that by now feels like part of the ritual itself. He adds a few drops of honey, sticky and golden, and begins to grind the mixture into a coarse paste. And then, the star ingredient, he lifts one of the frogs from its dish, its skin slick with moisture, and with careful fingers, gathers a bit of the clear, viscous slime from its back. The frog blinks slowly, resigned to this odd intimacy. The slime joins the herbs in the mortar, the physician's pestle working them into a sticky, fragrant mass. Historians still argue whether frog slime was prized for its supposed magical properties, its cooling effect, or merely because it was at hand and thus pressed into service by necessity. The paste, once ready, is scraped into the iron pot, where it is thinned with water drawn from a clay jug and set over a small brazier. The mixture bubbles gently, the aroma shifting from sharp to mellow as the herbs release their strength. The physician stirs it with slow, deliberate circles, watching the liquid darken slightly, the honey caramelizing, the frog slime binding. It all together in a smooth, glossy broth. Outside, the village is alive with the sounds of day, the clatter of cartwheels, the bleat of goats, the distant hammering of the blacksmith at his forge. But here, in the quiet of the chamber, the world has narrowed to the soft bubble of the potion and the steady movements of the physician's hand. He ladles a small portion into a cup, the liquid thick and warm, and offers it to you with the gravity of a man presenting a rare elixir. The taste is strange, sweet from the honey, sharp from the herbs, and beneath it all, a faint, earthy note that you suspect comes from the frog slime. It coats your throat, oddly soothing, and the physician nods with satisfaction. He explains that such a potion is said to restore balance, to cool the inner fires, to bring harmony to humors run amok. Some scholars suggest that these brews may indeed have provided mild relief, if only from the hydration and the calming ritual of their preparation. Others argue that the real magic lay in the care with which they were made, in the faith they inspired. The physician busies himself with cleaning his tools, wiping the mortar and pestle, stirring the embers of the brazier to life so that the remaining potion stays warm. The frog rests once more in its dish, untroubled by its brief contribution to your health. The room smells of herbs and honey, a welcome change from the sharper scents of the night. You sit quietly, the warmth of the potion spreading through you, the weight of the frog amulet a small, steady presence at your waist. The poultice cool against your chest, the frogs at your feet still as stone. The physician watches you for a moment, then turns back to his shelves, as though considering what curious remedy might yet be called upon before the day is done. And so you wait, caught between the old and the new, between ritual and hope, in this chamber where frog and flask alike have their part to play. The sun now bathes the chamber in a soft golden light, but despite the brightness of the day outside, your physician shows no sign of resting. He speaks of the importance of vigilance, especially at night, when humors shift in the dark, when fevers rise, and when the body's secrets are most easily glimpsed. And so he prepares for what he calls the night pea calls, as though they are as natural a part of the rhythm of life as prayer or meals. He sets aside a fresh flask, clean and clear, ready to receive a new sample should your fever surge after nightfall. A small lamp of oil is placed within easy reach, its wick trimmed and ready, the flame quick to catch at the physician's touch. The brazier's embers are banked so that they might be stirred to life swiftly if more potions are required. He hums as he works, that same soft tune that has followed you through this strange journey, as comforting now as the familiar creak of the chamber's beams. Historians still argue whether these nocturnal checks were genuinely seen as crucial medical acts or whether they served to reassure both patient and healer in the face of illness that often worsened under cover of night. The physician explains that the color of urine by lamplight reveals truths the eye might miss by day, that the quiet of night sharpens the senses, that the body's whispers can at last be heard. He gestures to his small window slit, beyond which the day hums with life, traders calling their wares, the clatter of hooves, the laughter of children at play. But he speaks of night as the true domain of the healer, when the world sleeps and the body's secrets rise to the surface like bubbles in a flask. He arranges the flasks carefully by the bedside, alongside a cloth and a small funnel, so no precious drop will be lost when the time comes. You can picture it, the physician, roused by your moan or by the prickling instinct of a man who has spent his life tending the sick, lighting his lamp with swift precision, lifting a flask to study its contents by flickering flame. He would swirl it gently, watching the bubbles rise, sniff its surface for the sharp tang of bile or the sour note of imbalance. He would hum softly, as if to soothe both patient and himself. Some scholars suggest that these night rituals offered real value, the quiet, the focus, the unhurried examination. Others argue it was but another layer of medieval theater, a performance of care in a world where true cures were scarce. But in this room, with its flasks and frogs, its poultice and charms, the physician prepares as though the night's checks might tip the balance between health and harm. He stirs the brazier too. Life once more, the soft crackle of flame filling the chamber with warmth. He tests his lamp, ensuring it catches quickly, and positions it where it will cast the best light. The frog at your foot shifts, perhaps sensing the preparations, perhaps merely dreaming of cool ponds and open skies. The frog amulet at your waist rests quiet and still, its task unchanged. The physician pours water into a small basin and places it by the bedside. so that his hands may be clean before and after each night ritual. He speaks softly of the importance of order, of readiness, of the healer's duty to meet illness not with panic, but with calm purpose. The chamber feels at once smaller and safer, a cocoon against the uncertainties of the night. Outside, the village bustles on, but here, all is preparation, all is quiet resolve. The physician glances once more at his flasks, at his lamp, at his patient, and nods. The night may yet bring new challenges, but he is ready, and so with the soft croak of the frogs as your lullaby, you settle deeper into the strange embrace of medieval care. The day presses on, though in this quiet chamber time seems to bend and blur, shaped not by the sun's position, but by the slow rhythm of healing rituals. The physician, having tended to the frogs, flasks, and preparations for nightfall, now turns to recount a peculiar and rare role in the world of medieval medicine, that of the royal urine examiner. He leans against his work table, folding his arms, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as though sharing secrets too lofty for ordinary ears. He tells you of how, in great courts and noble houses, there existed those whose entire task was the examination of the bodily fluids of the highborn. These were men, occasionally women, who held the privilege, or perhaps the burden, of studying the urine of kings, queens, and lords. Their flasks were finer, their charts grander, their words weighed as heavily as those of priests. Some were even granted the use of velvet-lined cases to carry the precious specimens, adorned with family crests or celestial symbols, because even P, it seems, could not escape the need for ceremony. Historians still argue whether these royal urine watchers truly held influence, or whether their pronouncements were simply folded into the grand theater of court life. The physician recounts with a wry smile how one such examiner claimed to foresee a rebellion from the pattern of bubbles in a duke's morning sample, only for the rebellion to break out a month later. Coincidence? Divine insight? A lucky guess? The scholars, of course, are divided. He retrieves a flask from his shelf, larger and more ornate than the others, though chipped at the rim. It's his nod to those noble examiners, a reminder that all patients, high or low, produce samples worthy of careful study. He holds it up as though expecting you to marvel at its size, its thickness of glass, the faint trace of etching near. The base dot outside. The sounds of the village have shifted as the day ripens. The sharp ring of the blacksmith's hammer, the sing-song calls of merchants advertising their wares, the distant bleating of sheep being driven to pasture. But here, in the hush of the chamber, you are transported in story to the velvet-draped sick rooms of dukes and princes, where flasks of urine were borne solemnly on cushions and examined with all the gravity of an oracle consulting the stars. Physician chuckles softly, remembering a tale of a royal examiner who was so valued by his monarch that he was gifted a fine gold ring, only to fall from grace when a rival claimed his readings were nothing more than the mutterings of a madman. Some scholars suggest such rivalries were common, as healers and seers jostled for position and patronage in the courts of the powerful. Others believe these stories were exaggerated by later chroniclers. Keen to weave a good yarn, the physician sets the flask down and adjusts your frog amulet, ensuring its cord sits comfortably against your skin. The frogs at your feet rest quietly. Now, their small bodies still, their duty fulfilled for the moment. The poultice on your chest is cooled further, its scent faint but still clinging to the air, mingling with the sweet notes of the herbs drying by the window. He pours you a cup of water, fresh from his jug, and speaks of how, in the grand halls of power, even the simple act of urinating became wrapped in ritual, in secrecy, in meaning. The urine of a king might be guarded as closely as state documents. Its interpretation might sway decisions of war or peace. The flasks might be sealed with wax, marked with signets, delivered by trusted hands under cover of night dot, somewhere beyond the chamber. A dog barks once, twice, then falls silent. A breeze stirs the herbs, and the room feels cooler, fresher. The physician leans back, his tale complete for now, content that you have glimpsed, through his words, the curious world of royal urine watchers. And so, you sit quietly once more, the weight of your amulet a small, steady presence, the frogs, your silent companions, the flasks lined up like sentinels at your side, as the day drifts on toward its next peculiar chapter. The physician, his voice low and measured, now speaks of the stranger forces that medieval healers sought to guard against, forces beyond mere imbalance of humors, beyond fevers and chills. He tells you of frogs used not only for drawing out poison or cooling a fevered brow, but as shields against the unseen, witches, curses, and malevolent spirits that lurked at the edges of belief. He crosses the chamber to a shelf where a small, dried frog rests beneath a layer of dust, its limbs splayed as if frozen mid-leap, its form hardened by time. He lifts it gently, almost tenderly, as though it still holds power, and explains that such a frog, prepared with care, dried beneath a full moon, wrapped in linen soaked in blessed water, sprinkled with ash from a sacred hearth, could be worn as a charm against evil. It might be hidden in a child's cradle, tucked beneath a house's threshold, or hung above the bed of a fevered patient to confuse the spirits that sought to do harm. Historians still argue whether these practices were part of formal medicine or belonged wholly to the realm of folk belief. But here, in this chamber, there is little distinction between the two. The physician unwraps another small bundle, revealing what looks at first like a scrap of old cloth, but is, in fact, the remnants of a frog charm once sewn into the lining of a tunic. He runs his fingers over the faded stitches and speaks of healers who would sew such creatures into garments, worn by those traveling through dangerous lands or serving in battle. A hidden talisman of protection. Outside, the sounds of the day seem distant now, as though the chamber exists in its own quiet world. A breeze stirs the drying herbs, carrying with it the faintest scent of lavender and rue, plants thought to ward off evil in their own right. The frogs at your feet shift slightly, their bindings still snug, their presence a small steady comfort. The physician tells of charms made with frogs' bones, crushed and mixed with wax to form tiny figures that could be placed at crossroads, or buried at the edge of fields to protect crops from blight or hail. Some believe that the right bone, found in the right frog at the right phase of the moon, could even break a curse or banish a nightmare. Others feared that the wrong charm, wielded by the wrong hands, might bring ruin instead of relief. Scholars still debate the line between protective magic and harmful spellcraft in these practices, but to those who lived them, the distinction was as much about intent as method. The physician replaces the dried frog on its shelf, dusts his hands, and adjusts the frog amulet at your waist with care. The charm feels warm against your skin now, as though it has absorbed some of the chamber's quiet energy. The poultice on your chest remains cool, the herbs in the air soothing. The frogs at your feet content. He pours himself a cup of water, sips slowly, and speaks of how healers would sometimes carry frog charms of their own, tucked into pouches alongside their herbs and flasks, as much for their own protection as for their patients. He chuckles softly, recalling a tale of a healer who claimed his frog amulet saved him from a lightning strike, though others whispered that it was simply luck and a well-timed dive into a muddy ditch. The day outside presses on, but here, in the hush of the healer's chamber, you are wrapped in the curious safety of ancient charms, the weight of amulets and rituals settling around you like a protective cloak. The physician surveys his tools, his flasks, his frogs, and seems content. For the moment, ready for whatever the world or the spirits may bring next. The physician, his gaze lingering on the little shelf where his frog charms rest, now shifts the conversation to an even stranger and more ambitious branch of medieval thought, where frogs and urine were not merely tools of healing or protection, but keys to the grand mysteries of alchemy itself. He reaches for a heavy leather-bound book, its cover cracked and corners worn from long handling, and lays it upon the table with care. The pages within are filled with symbols, suns, moons, flasks, frogs, and curiously, images of urine flasks set alongside sketches of gold coins and radiant orbs. He traces one of these drawings with his finger, explaining in hushed tones that there were those who believed urine to be a gateway to transmutation. The color, the sediment, the bubbles, each was thought by some alchemists to offer clues not just about the health of the body, but about the hidden properties of matter itself. Could the essence of gold be glimpsed in a flask of golden hued urine? Could the right preparation of bodily fluids, combined with frog slime or bone ash, bring the alchemist closer to the elusive philosopher's stone? Historians still argue whether these pursuits were sincere quests for transformation or elaborate metaphors for inner purification and balance. The physician tells of one particularly bold alchemist who, it was said, collected the urine of kings and nobles, believing that the humors of the powerful might contain traces of celestial influence, making them better suited for the work of transmutation. This man, so the story goes, boiled vast quantities of these royal fluids with frog extract, honey, and powdered eggshell, claiming the resulting paste glowed faintly in moonlight and would with time yield gold. Needless to say, no gold was ever found, but the tale lived on. The physician chuckles softly as he recounts this, shaking his head at the folly, but also, perhaps, at the wonder of it, the endless hope that something as humble, as human as urine, might conceal within it the secrets of the cosmos. He opens his book further to show diagrams of frogs seated beside flasks, tiny stars drawn around their heads, as if these creatures, too, were thought to possess some fragment of alchemical wisdom. The frogs at your feet rest still, their bodies cool against your skin. The amulet at your waist feels heavier somehow, as though sharing in the weight of these grand ambitions. Outside, the village hums with the business of the day. But here, in the quiet of the chamber, you are adrift in tales of potions and powders, of flasks and flames, of dreams woven from the simplest of materials. The physician sets the book aside and lifts one of his flasks, holding it up so the sunlight catches it just so, making the pale liquid within glow gold for the briefest of moments. He smiles, perhaps seeing in that glint what so many alchemists saw: a promise, a mystery, an echo of the unattainable. He speaks of how some believed that frog slime, with its dual nature, neither wholly of water nor wholly of land, symbolized the balance needed to bridge the worlds of the base and the noble, the mortal and the divine. Some scholars suggest these alchemical pursuits were sincere scientific efforts, misguided perhaps, but driven by a genuine desire to understand the world's hidden workings. Others see them as hopeful fables, ways for healers and seekers to impose meaning upon the unruly elements of life. But here, as the physician returns the flask to its place, the room feels touched by that same quiet yearning, the belief that even in frogs and urine, the universe might whisper its secrets to those who know how to listen. The frogs croak softly, as if in agreement or perhaps in protest at their role in these lofty schemes. The poultice on your chest has cooled completely now, its scent a faint memory. The physician folds his hands, surveying his tools, his charms, his books, and his flasks, and the chamber seems to breathe with him, a space of wonder, of ritual, of endless questions and quiet hope. The physician closes the alchemy book with a gentle thump, the dust rising in a small cloud that glows in the sun's slanting rays. His expression softens, as though the grand mysteries of gold and immortality have given way to a simpler, humbler memory. He begins to speak, voice tinged with amusement, of a most curious incident, when the line between medicine and meal blurred disastrously, the tale of the frog feast that was meant to heal but ended in misadventure. He tells of a village some miles distant where a healer, eager to outdo his rivals, proclaimed that not only could frogs draw out illness through the skin, but that their flesh, properly prepared, could cure fevers and restore strength faster than any poultice or potion. The villagers, desperate during a summer of lingering sickness, gathered frogs by the dozens from the marshy edges of their fields. They brought them to the healer, who set to work boiling, roasting, and stewing the creatures into a variety of dishes, soups thick with herbs, pies cradling tender frog meat, even skewers grilled over open flames. Historians still argue whether such a feast was born of sincere belief or opportunistic showmanship, but the tale endures. The physician describes how the villagers, at first hopeful, filled their bellies with these froggy creations, encouraged by the healer's confident words and the promise of swift recovery. But as the night wore on, those same bellies began to rebel. Moans echoed through the village as stomachs churned, and what was meant to heal instead laid low nearly every household. The physician shakes his head with a rueful smile. He speaks of how the healer's reputation crumbled faster than the pastry of his ill-fated frog pies, and how wiser heads reminded folk that the frog's power lay not in its flesh upon the tongue, but in its cool touch upon the fevered skin, in its quiet presence as a charm or poultice. Some scholars suggest that the tale became a caution against confusing ritual symbolism with literal consumption. Others see it as a gentle ribbing of overconfident healers who promise too much. You sit, imagining the scene, the villagers groaning in their beds, the healer wringing his hands, the frogs, those few who escaped the cookpot, croaking triumphantly from their ponds, perhaps sensing that their medicinal duties were better served in life than in stew. The frog at your foot stirs, as if in agreement, while the amulet at your waist feels oddly reassuring in its simplicity. Outside, the clamor of the village continues. Wheels rumble over cobbles, voices rise and fall in greeting and barter. A dog barks at a passing cart. But here, in the quiet of the chamber, the physician's tale lingers like a lesson. He pours a small cup of water, offers it to you, and remarks that sometimes the humblest application, the frog at the foot, the poultice on the chest, the charm at the waist, offers more than any feast or fancy promise. He glances at his own. Frogs resting in their dishes, their small eyes bright in the afternoon light, their limbs still and content. He murmurs that they, at least, have earned their place in the healer's art, not as delicacies, but as patient companions in the strange dance of medieval medicine. And so, with the taste of the tale still fresh in your mind, you sit quietly, waiting to see what curious chapter the physician will share next. The physician, leaning now against his battered table, gazes thoughtfully at his flasks, at the resting frogs, at the quiet tools of his curious trade. And as the sun dips low, casting the chamber in a warm amber glow, he begins to speak of a remedy so simple, so humble, yet so utterly bewildering to modern ears: the use of warm urine sweetened with honey as a potion for soothing coughs and sore throats. He moves slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who has performed this ritual many times before. From a jug kept near the hearth, where it has stayed pleasantly warm, he pours a measure of pale liquid into a small clay cup. To this he adds a spoonful of honey, golden and thick, stirring gently until the two meld into a warm, sweet-smelling mixture. The scent of honey masks the sharper notes of the other ingredient, leaving the air heavy with its soothing aroma. Historians still argue whether this practice was born of genuine medicinal observation. After all, urine is sterile at its source, and honey is known even today for its antibacterial properties, or whether it was simply another in a long list of hopeful, if misguided, remedies meant to comfort more than cure. The physician holds out the cup with great care, as though offering a draught of liquid gold, and encourage you to sip. The taste is not nearly as unpleasant as you feared. The warmth of the liquid eases the tightness in your throat. The honey coats your mouth with its familiar sweetness. The other notes are there, faint but present, though the physician's reassuring gaze seems to steady your nerves more than the potion itself. He explains softly that such mixtures are meant not only to soothe the body, but to remind the spirit of its resilience, that in drinking, you affirm your will to heal. Outside, The day wanes further, and the sounds of the village soften. The last calls of merchants packing up their wares, the lowing of cattle driven home, the first notes of a lute drifting from the tavern. Inside, the chamber feels timeless, a space suspended between day and night, between ancient practice and hopeful cure. The physician busies himself tidying his tools, wiping the lip of the jug, rinsing the spoon, adjusting the flask so they catch the last light of day like tiny stained glass windows. The frogs rest quietly in their dishes, their work for now complete. The amulet at your waist sits snug and steady, the poultice cool against your chest, the warmth of the potion spreading gently through your core. He speaks of how such remedies, humble as they are, serve not only to heal but to comfort. The ritual of preparation, the offering of the cup, the shared moment between healer and patient, all these bind the two in a compact of care and trust. Some scholars suggest that in this, more than in any ingredient or method, lay the true power of medieval medicine. Others argue that such potions, while harmless in small measure, were but hopeful illusions in a world starved for real cures. The physician glances at you with a small, quiet smile, seeing perhaps the relief in your eyes or simply the comfort that comes from being tended with such earnest devotion. The frogs give a soft final croak as the sun slips beyond the horizon, and the chamber settles into the gentle hush of evening. And so you sit, warmed by honey and strange remedy alike, wrapped in the fading light of day and the curious embrace of a healer's care, awaiting whatever odd wonder may come next. The physician, as twilight deepens and the chamber cools, moves about with a slower, steadier rhythm, as though sensing that the night's rituals draw to their natural close. He pauses beside each tool of his trade, the flasks of pale gold and cold, cloudy amber, the little dishes where the frogs now rest quietly, the battered mortar and pestle, the parchment charts rolled and tied with care. His eyes linger on the frog amulet at your waist, on the cooled poultice upon your chest, and he offers a soft nod of approval, as if to say that, for now, balance has been restored as best as ancient wisdom allows. He speaks in a low voice of how these odd and wondrous remedies, frogs tied to feet, poultices smeared across fevered skin, flasks of urine studied by candle and moonlight, potions of honeyed warmth, all these are part of a long and winding legacy. In ages past, they were the best that could be offered, humble gestures against the great unknown of illness, ways to bring comfort, to ease fear, to give the patient and the healer alike this sense that something, at least, was being done. Historians still argue whether these practices delayed the rise of more effective medicine or paved the way for it, preserving a tradition of careful observation and compassionate care that would, in time, blossom into new discoveries. The physician, for his part, seems untroubled by such debates. He gathers the frogs gently, returning them to their larger bowl where fresh water glimmers in the soft lamplight. He sets aside the used poultice cloth, cleans his tools with methodical ease, and lays a light wool blanket over your knees. One final kindness before the night fully claims the world beyond these walls. Outside, the last voices of the day fade into quiet. The stars blink softly into view, and the village rests. Inside, the chamber glows faintly with the light of a single lamp, its small flame steady and sure. The physician folds his hands, glancing once more at his patient you with a mixture of pride and humility, knowing that while his methods may seem strange to future eyes, they were offered with care, with faith, and with the earnest hope that they might do good. And so ends this chapter of Curious Cures. The frogs sleep, the flasks are at rest, the parchment charts wait for another night, another patient, another mystery to ponder. And you, wrapped in the soft hush of this ancient space, find yourself drifting between waking and sleep, between the world of frogs and flasks and the gentle pull of dreams. The lamplight fades gently now, casting softer shadows against the chamber's old stone walls. The air is cooler, touched by the night breeze that slips through the narrow window, carrying with it the scent of herbs and earth and distant wood smoke. The frogs rest silent, their small forms still beneath the water's surface, no longer needed, their work done for this night. The physician's footsteps soften as he moves about, his tasks complete, his tools cleaned and set aside, his flasks lined up like quiet sentinels awaiting the dawn. His humming, so constant through the night, fades to silence, replaced by the subtle music of the night itself, the soft sigh of the wind, the far-off call of an owl, the gentle creak of ancient beams settling into sleep. You, too, are part of this hush now, the weight of the amulet at your waist, the memory of the poultice's coolness, the warmth of strange remedies and stranger stories, all settling around you like a quilt of calm. The night wraps close, safe and steady, the world beyond these walls drifting further away as your breathing slows, your thoughts quiet, and sleep gathers you gently in its care, greater than end of script. Sweet dreams,